Hey y'all, so today I'm going to be doing my August book haul. August book haul. Now, I know that I already did a summer book haul, so you're probably like, Kristen, August is still summer. What you doing? But in August, I ended up going out of town and to a ton of half-price books that had a lot of books that I've been curious about for quite a while, and I ended up just kind of letting myself buy what I wanted, and there were also some books that I got online, so I ended up with, I think, somewhere around 10 books to haul for August. I just counted, and I believe there are 11, so a little bit more than I thought. But there's one that's still in the mail to me, and I thought it would be here by now, and it's the one that I'm most excited about, and it's still not here, so I will probably have to wait and include that into a different haul. But I did want to mention that there's another book that I'm waiting on that is not here. So for this first one, the cover is both NSFW and kind of a spoiler, so I'm not going to show it to you. I'm just going to show you the back of it, which is totally a cop-out, but whatever. It is volume 8 of the Battle Royale manga series. Also, I find it funny that it has been rated by Playboy magazine. What? I mean, this was an older series. Like, I want to say that this manga series came out in like 2005 or something, so still weird. Anyway, this manga series, as I've said in probably my last like 3 book hauls, this manga series is based off of the novel Battle Royale by Koshan Takami, which is a book that I read back in May and absolutely loved. I've only read the first 2 volumes of the manga so far, but it's been amazing, and I apologize for the fact that you're just looking at the back of it, but like I said, it's both NSFW and a spoiler for the series, so you just get to see the back. I've explained this premise so many times over the past few months, but I'll do it again. Essentially, the Battle Royale story is very similar to the Hunger Games, although Battle Royale did it first. The story takes place in a dystopian society and centers around a 9th grade class of 42 students who are basically stranded on an island for this thing called the program, and they are forced to kill each other off one by one until one person remains. Like I said, the premise is kind of similar to the Hunger Games, except it did it first. And the thing that I really love about this versus the Hunger Games is that you get to see inside the minds of almost all of the characters, if not all of the characters, so you get multiple different woven storylines, and I love that aspect of it. I absolutely loved the novel, and so far I've really enjoyed the manga series, so excited to eventually get to this. So the next book that I got, I probably got at the end of July, but either way, it is If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. I checked this out from the library, and it was the first book that I read during the Booktubeathon, and I absolutely loved it. I went into depth on my thoughts in this in my Booktubeathon wrap-up, so I will leave that linked up in the cards, but essentially this is kind of a dark academia novel. I believe that is where it fits in. Essentially, this book begins with our main character being released from prison, and the guy who put him into prison is someone that he's kept in contact with over the years, and he is retiring from the police force, and he just really wants to know what exactly happened that night 10 years prior when the crime happened. So the main character is sitting down and he's going to explain the story. The main plotline of the story centers around our main character and his extremely tight-knit group of friends who are all Shakespearean actors in this really, really small acting college, and they're all seniors. And while this novel is kind of a whodunit, it is more of a character study, and it follows these characters both before, during, and after this crime, and it's just a really, really fascinating story, and I loved it. So since I checked it out from the library, I had to buy my own copy because I was just obsessed. Next up, moving on to all of the used books that I got at Half Price Books, which I am honestly really excited about. These were all books that I was very curious about beforehand, and now I'm excited to have them in my collection. So I take back what I just said. This first book is one that I actually didn't know existed until browsing at this Half Price Books, and I got intrigued and I was really curious, and I've been wanting to read something by this author for quite a while, so given how small it is, I figured it might be a good starting point, and that is called The Strange Library by Haruki Murakami. I already have 1Q84 by him, and this was one that immediately grabbed my attention because I mean, it's about a library. I'll read the back to you, which was really what sold me on getting this because it really intrigued me. A lonely boy, a mysterious girl, and a tormented sheep man plot their escape from the nightmarish library of internationally acclaimed best-selling Haruki Murakami's wild imagination. So that just really intrigued me, and I couldn't help but pick this up. Also, the format of this book is really unique. Like, it folds up like that, and then this folds down, and then it's got this like really large text, so it's even a smaller book than it first appears. I'm just very intrigued by this, and I know that Murakami novels are known for being kind of trippy and very weird, so I'm just really intrigued. Next up is a book that's been on my radar for quite a while, so when I found it at a Half Price Books, I couldn't help but pick it up, and that is The Air Affair by Jasper Fforde. I'm finding the premise of this kind of hard to explain, but essentially this is the first book in the Thursday Next series that is part spy novel and very literary, and also has like an alternate world type thing to it. Our main character, Thursday Next, is a detective dealing with literary crime. In this alternate London, literature is like extremely important, and apparently there is a way to steal characters from novels, because the premise of this is that Jane Eyre is somehow plucked out of her book. One of my coworkers actually recommended this book a long time ago as one of those like kind of just really quick fun reads, and the premise is super intriguing, so I'm very interested to see what this book and series has in store for me. So the next book that I picked up at Half Price Books is one that I actually got from the library because I loved If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio, which I mentioned earlier in the video, and then I found it at Half Price Books and I couldn't help myself, and that is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. After reading If We Were Villains, I was really in this mood for something dark that took place at a college, something like a murder mystery, and this was recommended to me, and I actually saw some people saying that If We Were Villains somehow ripped off this book. I have not finished this. I actually am only like 50 pages in, and I read that like a month ago. So from what I've read so far, it doesn't seem like If We Were Villains copied it or anything, but they do have somewhat similar premises. In this story, it centers around a very tight-knit elite group of classic students and their professor, and there is some sort of murder that happens, and it's again kind of a whodunit, but also it seems to be partially a character study as well. I'm super intrigued. I have not picked this up in several weeks, so I'm probably gonna have to restart from the beginning, but it's one that has me really intrigued. Next up is volume 1 of the Tokyo Ghoul manga series. With this one, I did something that I don't normally do anymore, which is I've heard great things about the series, I see it everywhere, and I was intrigued. So I got the first volume. I honestly am not totally sure what exactly the story is about. Obviously, it deals with ghouls in Tokyo, presumably, but that's all I really know. So yeah, super intrigued to check this out and to see what the series is all about. Next up is The Dark House by Dawn Kurtagich. The Dark House. The Dark House. The Dark House. The next one that I got was The Dead House by Dawn Kurtagich. I still haven't learned to pronounce this author's name. I'm so sorry. I have seen it pronounced in videos, but I've seen it pronounced like 3 or 4 different ways. So not sure. I hope that I pronounced it correctly. This is a book that I've had my eye on for quite a while, and I actually checked it out from the library back in October of last year and never ended up getting around to it, but it's one that has intrigued me for so long. I didn't even think about this, but it's also kind of another dark academia novel. I believe that this mostly takes place at a school. I'm not sure if it's a boarding school or if it's just a normal high school, but it centers around this girl who has 2 different personalities and or is 2 different people altogether, and it's told in a like non-traditional form with like journal entries and memos and stuff like that, which is something that I'm always intrigued by. So yeah, it's very dark. It deals with like the deaths of some students and trying to figure out what happened, so definitely something that is super intriguing for me. So the next book is one that I was already kind of intrigued by, and then I saw it at every single half-price books I went to that day, and I just caved and finally got it, and that is The Walled City by Ryan Graudin. First of all, I would like to point out that I'm obsessed with this cover. It's super cool, my favorite colors, I love it. So the actual premise of this is pretty vague, which is why it's so intriguing, but it appears to be mostly a dystopian and potentially some fantastical elements centering around these characters who are trying to get out of this walled city. It just sounds super dark and pretty action-packed and very mysterious, and the vagueness of it makes me super, super, super intrigued. I'm very fascinated. I've seen some good things about this, so very excited to jump into this sometime soon. I always say that in book hauls and then I like never jump into them soon, but y'all know, y'all get it. It sounds really intriguing. So the next book that I got is one of those books that just like ticks off all of those boxes of things that really intrigue me and that I love, so let me read that list off to you. Apologies for the sudden lighting shifts that are currently going on because it has not been doing this until just now, so we'll see what happens. So this book has in it Oxford, as in like the city Oxford, which I love and have been to, the Bodleian Library in Oxford, which is super beautiful and I've also been to, a young scholar, witches, an enchanted manuscript, books, demons, witches, other creatures, history, magic. This just sounds fascinating. An Enchanted World, and that is A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. This is one of those books that I've seen everywhere and have been like vaguely familiar with for forever, but I didn't know that that was what this was about. Like, it just deals with like tons of things that I absolutely love, and it takes place in Oxford, which is literally the most beautiful place I've ever been, and I love Oxford so much, so I am obsessed with this premise, and I hope it lives up to it. So yeah, this just deals with a bunch of things that I absolutely love, so I'm very, very intrigued by this. Next up is a book by my favorite author that I somehow did not already own, and that is The Alloy of Law by Brandon Sanderson. Depending on how you think about this, this is either the fourth book in the Mistborn series or the first book in the spin-off series. Pretty much all of Brandon Sanderson's adult work takes place within the Cosmere, which is the universe that he's created, but I believe that this one specifically takes place on the same world as the Mistborn series. And this series takes place like 300 years after the events of the Mistborn series, so it's basically almost an entirely different world except for the magic system. As I've said many times on this channel, the Mistborn trilogy is my favorite series of all time after Harry Potter, so I have been meaning to go back and reread it because it's been 2 years, so I think once I do that, I'm going to jump into this series finally, but this is the only one that I actually own in the series now, so I'll have to get the other ones, but I love Brandon Sanderson. I love the magic system in this world, it's so cool, and I'm excited to jump into this new series and jump back into the Mistborn trilogy because it's fantastic. Getting to the end here, the last two are by the same author, the first of which is Little Monsters by Kara Thomas. This was the Booksplosion read-along book for August, and that's kind of why I got it. I've been watching a lot of podcasts lately, and I tend to watch a TV show and then like watch the podcast about it, and I kind of wanted to do the same thing with a book to get myself back into a reading mood. And I've been, if you couldn't tell, in a pretty dark reading mood lately, and this is a dark novel, so I figured this was perfect. So the premise of this is that our main character moves to a new town, and it's a small town, and she begins to make friends with a couple of the girls there, but one night they go out without her, which is kind of weird because they kind of force her to go out with them a lot of the time, and that night one of them doesn't come home. And it's kind of the mystery surrounding this girl's disappearance and also what might have happened that night. Like I said, I have already read this. I haven't decided on a rating. It's one of those books that is a low 4 or a high 3 out of 5 for me, and I haven't decided where it falls. I want to say that it's gonna be a 4, but more because of the fact that I think it's a little bit more of a refreshing young adult thriller than the fact that I liked it, because I did like it, but it's not one that's going to like really, really stick with me for a long time. I realized that that explanation was kind of complicated, but it's one of those ones that I appreciate more than I like. That being said, it was one that I did really enjoy. I read it all in one single sitting, so it was something that was really fascinating. So I do definitely recommend this, although, like I said, it's probably not one that's going to stick with me for quite as long, but that might also be because I read it all in one sitting. And finally, the last book in this haul is, like I said, by the same author, and that is The Darkest Corners by Kara Thomas. Also, I would like to point out that I don't know if this is still a thing, but when I got this on Amazon, like last week, it was $2.99. $3 for this book that sounds really intriguing, so definitely check that out. So like with Little Monsters, this takes place in a small town. Our main character is actually returning to the town where she spent like the first 9 or 10 years of her life. She left the town after something happened. I believe it was a murder, but something happened. There was a trial, someone was arrested, and now that she's returned, she's starting to kind of question what happened back then. So it just sounds really fascinating and very dark and kind of a whodunit. So as you've seen in this haul, that's kind of what I've been in the mood for lately, so very intrigued to see this. So that is it for this book haul. I plan to not do another one of these for a little while because one of my goals over the next few months is to get this TBR down. And the only way I can do that is by reading the books that I own and not buying anymore. So hopefully I do a good job of that. I don't have any books that I'm like dying to buy right now, so hopefully I'm able to get my TBR down, and my next book haul will be sometime around the end of the year. Honestly, there's a lot sitting on the shelf over here that I'm very, very intrigued by, so hopefully I pick those up very soon and I get my TBR down by the end of the year. As always, I will leave links down in the description to my blog, Twitter, and Goodreads. Please add me as a friend on Goodreads. I would love to be friends with all of you. Like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!